to order and ask that roll be called, please.
Bluth. Here. Disharum.
Here.
Henry. Here. Holzenhaus. Holzhauser. Sorry. Hummel. Wagenbach.
Here, present.
Here.
Wisdom.
Here.
I'd like to ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The board will now move on to the public participation portion of the meeting. Dr. Dearman will begin with the superintendent's report.
Mine is very brief. No FOIA requests, and I have nothing else to report at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Dearman. At this time, we'll move on to public comments. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board? If so, please raise your hand. You'll need to sign in here on this paper, or we can actually put it, you want to put that on the table over there, it's easier for them. Thank you so much. Here's a pen. You need a pen? Yeah. Before addressing the board, I would like to remind you of our process. Per board policy 2.230, we ask that when addressing the board, please identify yourself and be brief. Comments shall be limited to 5 minutes. The speaker is asked to please conduct oneself with respect and civility towards others. Individuals less than 18 years of age are permitted to address the board if accompanied by his or her parent or guardian. The board typically does not engage in two-way conversations during the public portion of the meeting. Any follow-up response will be addressed by the administration at a later time. To be respectful of others and protect confidentiality, complaints against individual students, staff members, or individual board members, either named or unnamed, shall not be orally presented to the Board of Education. Such complaints should be put in writing, signed by the person or persons making the charges, and delivered to the Board of Education Secretary. At this time, I'd like to ask anyone who wishes to address the board, come forward and sign the public participation sheet sitting on the desk. Then each speaker may come to the podium and begin by speaking into the microphone, stating their name and the topic that will be addressed. Thank you.
My name is Mary Nelson. I live in this district. I taught in this district for a lot of years, and I retired 2 years ago. I'm here to question the board members' behavior. According to board policy 2110, board president will serve as a spokesperson to the media. In a recent Journal Star article about the esports, two board members, neither of whom were the current president, were questioned and gave their opinion. This is against board policy. Issues need to be debated at the table, and board policy must be followed by the board members. Thank you.
Thank you. May I have the next person come up, please?
My name is Aaron Barrington, 5624 West Legion Hall.
Thank you.
I attended the last board meeting, and as I was sitting there, I heard this esports come up. And so I did a little investigation. What I found is that this esports opportunity is now being supported by many local colleges. The college my daughter goes to is giving 10 full ride scholarships in esports. First community college in the area, looking for people with that opportunity. But that isn't what I came here to speak about with esports. Our staff is currently reading a book about the power of performance. And in that book study, We're trying to create moments for our students. There's a few students I think we need to try to create a moment for. I work at Hijra. I just got off work. It's a camp for special needs students. In my particular group that I get to see every day, I've got 2 students with cerebral palsy. They're bound to wheelchairs the entire day. I talked to one young man when this came up. I said, as I was taking him and assisting him with some bathrooming needs, I said, hey, our school's about to adopt this esports thing. He goes, man, I hope Ridgewoods does too, because that would give me something that I could participate in. He loves everything technology. He hears a beep beep. He knows whether it's a PlayStation going on, whether it's a Raycon wheelchair lift. That's his world. Another young lady, I'll call her Karen, also has cerebral palsy. She has a gaming channel. She doesn't have a gaming channel with real expensive video games. They play this game called Roblox. I can't pretend to know what it all does. I sit and watch them play when they have 20 minutes of time. And they talk together about what they're going to do, what their strategy is. On her gaming channel, under her parent supervision, she shows other people how she plays. Showed me a video today about the esports arena at Landmark. She goes, I got to go there. My neighbor designed them. If you've never been to the esports arena at Landmark, it's a whole area set up for young people, old people, to do what they like to do. And that's one group of students that I think we need to look at providing a moment for. Those students that may not be able to be on our sports team, may have some academic difficulties that may not be able to compete on my classical team, or do something else, but video gaming is an opportunity for them. Then I mentored a young man last year in my freshman biology class. This young man had some bullying issues and some tremendous attendance issues. And so I'd meet with him once a week. And he'd come to me, and during one of our, he said, what do you want to do for a living? I said, I want to design video games. I said, okay, how do we get there? He said, what kind of computer do you have at home? I live in the apartments. We don't have a computer that I can even play any of these games on. He doesn't have that opportunity. He missed a lot of schoolwork. We don't have a carrot for him. He's not fast enough to track team. He's not, but he would love to be a part of this, a program like this. And I think that's a young man that we might be able to provide a moment for. And then we've got others in the building. And the last group, we now have a crisis. Now, I don't want to talk just about boys, but we do have a crisis in this country of boys. Motivation of boys. You look at the Sterling Merit Award winners. 85% of the Sterling Merit Award winners are somewhere around there are girls. When I was a young man, boys competed in recess and everything else. We've taken some of that competition away. So the boys now, according to Leonard Sachs from the book Boys Adrift, boys are turning to video games because it's something they can win. They can get on a game and they can win a game. They can win Call of Duty. They can win FIFA. And it's encouraged to win. They're encouraged to do all those sorts of things. I'm not here to say whether I don't have enough research on how much we're going to spend on this or anything else, but I think we really need to look at whether we can make a moment for somebody. And if it's $10,000 to $20,000 on computers we might be able to shift somewhere else if this doesn't work, if we can make a moment for one kid, whether it be somebody that's having bullying and attendance issues, or somebody that's their only opportunity to compete. I think it's something for us to look at. And there's pluses and minuses on all sides of this. But I think we need to look at what we can do for common kids.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
coming to discuss the topic of esports. I'm very passionate about this topic. I'm going to begin for the personal reason. I have a nephew who is 16 years of age. He is in the Chicago School District. They have had esports for 2 years now. Prior to having esports, he was depressed. He was lonely. He was isolating himself in his basement. But most importantly, he had autism and didn't have a way to express himself. He's a twin. His brother is very athletic, very academically excellent. He is himself, but in high anxiety situations, he couldn't perform. Now, was he a straight A student? Absolutely. But could he handle Scholastic Bowl, chess club, robotics? No, he tried it all. And because of that, he had no outlet. He never, in 16 years, ever had a play date. Never in his life did he go out with friends. He started esports. He liked video gaming, he was naturally good at it. Within the first year, he developed friendships. Last month, he went to the movies with a group of friends. This is something he would never done before. This isn't a debate about screen time. Parent preferences, we're not going to change that in the home. Everybody has their personal views. It's not the duty of us as parents to judge another parent, and it's not the duty of the board to judge our parents or what we allow in the home environment. But in a regulated environment, it is actually proven that students who perform with esports are cognitively challenged, they develop teamwork skills, and they learn how to develop other analytical skills that can help them in life. There's research to support this. The American Academy of Pediatrics actually just released an article last month. This is a peer-reviewed scholarly journal. In esports, in a regulated environment, children are less likely to be addicted. Why is that to be? Because it's regulated. The esports that are done in my nephew's district, that's the team sponsor, the teacher sponsor, IHSA has a course that actually helps them identify students who may have addictive behaviors and provide resources in order to get them help. We're not going to prevent gaming addictions. If a child has gaming addictions, they're pre-exposed to this. It's going to be in the home environment. It's the job for the students and the school to provide resources to help students to identify it just like any other addiction, but we're not going to prevent this. But instead, if you provide a healthy outlet, what you're doing is you're taking students from those basements, from the headsets where they're interacting with children only via electronic means, and putting them in a team environment to teach them healthy boundaries in how to actually video game in a manner that isn't going to harm them. The gentleman previously mentioned that colleges have supported this. Paris 2024 is now introducing esports as an Olympic sport. So I mean, who are we to judge? Now we're judging the Olympic Committee saying, oh, it's okay internationally, but it's not okay in our schools. Dunlap is a progressive, excellent community and excellent district. I'm proud to have my children in this district. I was embarrassed to receive a text message today that said, hey, I saw a news article, and do you really live in that small-minded of a community? You need to move back ASAP. That hurt me, because that's not reflective of our community, and that's not reflective of our schools. Our principals and our educators, and I'd like to think our board, wants what's in the best interest of the students as a whole. Inclusivity and an outlet for every student to exceed and succeed to the best of their ability. I ask that the board really look and really research, peer-review, scholarly articles when making their decisions. Let's grow as a community. Let's grow as a district and be progressive. Let's set all of our children up to succeed, not just a select few. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? Okay, that concludes the public participation portion of the meeting. The board will now move on to the information discussion items. The school activity accounts reports are included in the packet. Are there any questions on the board? Next, we have the presentation on the ISTE conference by Matt Andrews, Amy Stefanski, and Stephanie Crawford. Are there any questions after this? Okay, of course we have to do it. All right.
All right, we were fortunate enough to send two individuals from our district, Stephanie Crawford, our instructional, one of our instructional coaches in the district, and Amy Stefanski, our district librarian, and they're just going to help us now.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we want to say thank you, first of all, for sending us, and we want to show you why it was worthwhile for us to take this trip. So yes, we went to Philadelphia, but why did we go? What is ISTE? Now, ISTE does stand for the International Society for Technology and Education, but we don't want you to get caught up on that word technology. We're not going to try to just say, oh, we need to sit in front of a Chromebook all day, see it's good. This is actually an organization that was started in 1971 by educators in K through higher ed. Okay? 1971, not 2000. This was then started to look at the advancement of technology in our school system and how it could impact learning. There are around 20,000 attendees that go to the annual conference. This year, the final numbers were more like 22,000. There are 1,900 sessions that are presented, so when we go, we're allowed to learn from all of these different perspectives that attend. And again, just love to put that at the end, started by educators, not by a corporation wanting to get our money. And this is from their website, and we felt like this quote is particularly poignant. Because ultimately, it's not about the technology at all. It's about changing the way learning and teaching takes place to make it more meaningful and impactful for educators and learners around the globe. And that's what our Chromebooks do. They provide equity for everyone, equity of learning. And that's what this allowed us to do, was find ways to reach all of our teachers, all of our students. So what we loved was the diversity. It was amazing. So many perspectives, more than what we get to see in our role here. We authentically engaged with educators, so it wasn't just going to a session and listening, but there were social times where we got to actually go up to leaders in the educational field and introduce ourselves and have discussions on pedagogy and best practices. We got to go sightseeing in Philly with them on ISTE-sponsored tours. These are things that were authentic engagement with these educators. And again, that access to leaders in the field of education. We learned discussion strategies for innovative thinking, copyright laws for education, meaningful tech use. You can read this list and see, these are just some of the highlights that we pulled out. These are some of those big things. I've already had to use the copyright laws for education since being back. I had a teacher come up to me and ask, I'm using some game elements in my classroom and I've chosen a Disney theme. I can post those on Instagram, right? No, actually you can't, and here's why. I just took this from a principal who's also a lawyer. So already, within 2 weeks of returning, I've put this to use, okay?
One of the things that I took away too is the open educational resources. That's what I talked about last month as well with our databases that we have. We pay for those, but how many more open resources there are for our students. So like right now I'm collaborating, kind of curating all these open resources from our governments and our parks and things like that only some teachers know about, but making sure that we're creating a database for our teachers to go and to make sure that they have authentic resources. The other thing we came away with, I went to a couple specific library sessions as well, is the content equity and curation. When it's one thing to talk about equitable access to technology, so making sure we've been concentrating on giving kids devices and making sure they have devices, but we want to make sure that the content on the devices are all equitable as well. So making sure that those students in different levels of our classes and different grades, and we have 3 second grade teachers to make sure all of our students are given equal opportunities for the actual lesson that's being done and not just talking about that. So my sessions in particular were kind of less technology and the copyright laws was our last one. And that one was actually filmed live. So once we get that, we're going to share that out with the staff as well because that was really well done. Some of the things that we did out there is we attended at least 20 plus 1 hour lecture sessions between the both of us. I attended the Future Ready breakfast. We did 40 individual open learning sessions. They had like these big courtyards with tables. They had students there from around the world as well, like classes of students. They're all like in their private school gear and all these things. So they just, this big open courtyard, we visited a lot of tables. We spent a lot of time in the expo hall. It's
probably one of my favorite things in the world. I talked to a lot of vendors that day. It's one of my passions, so I did a lot of that. We had one-to-one meetings with Cami, Scholastic. We went and saw Canvas. We went and talked to Lucid Press. I have a meeting with them tomorrow. We've already talked to Cami since we've come back. And we talked to Capstone. We went to 2 socials, the social market in Reading, which was open to all of us educators, and then we actually went to the Idea Social, so that's our Illinois chapter. So we have an ISTE affiliate here in Illinois, so we went to that. We met a whole bunch of people from the state of Illinois, so we did that as well. And then we were able to do a couple of excursions. But the other thing that we did is we actually presented when we were out there. So we didn't just go to learn, we actually presented. Stephanie had 2 sessions that she proposed and presented, and then I was lucky enough to end up picking up a session actually on our way out there. It was actually to present as well with the idea. So we did that as well. So that was something on top of it.
So we wanted to just show you sometimes pictures, kind of tell more of a story also. Just the interaction that we had with people, the learning that we did. So those 3 images are of the conscientious creativity, the Candyland, and then the meeting, staff meeting. Those are notes that I took while I was in session. So yes, we're learning, we're taking it back. It's not a document that I'm never going to look at again. This is real learning that can be pulled out, quickly accessed, shared with other teachers so that they can continue learning with us as well. And Amy is shown in the bottom picture with a really celebrated librarian and author who's doing fantastic things nationwide. And she got to meet her and, again, really just build that relationship, something that she would not have done if she couldn't have been at that conference. And then we met a dinosaur, yeah.
It's a very weird interaction. That's a company called Screen Beam. They do a Wi-Fi projector system, so you can take projectors with you, which is something that I want for the library, because when I go and present, it's something that can just Wi-Fi up to my computer and then it can be projected, or board meetings and travel a little bit.
So the results really is, we had overwhelmingly positive feedback from our presentations, and when we're out there, we are representing the district. We make business cards that we put out on our tables after our presentations, and the first thing on there after our name is the district that we're with. So and you saw in the picture, Amy was presenting in a Dunlap shirt. My second presentation, I was wearing a Dunlap shirt. We are constantly promoting the district when we go to these things as well. And that positive feedback that we get back, we're doing great things in the name of the district. Educators approach us to help them brainstorm solution to issues in their buildings. We've identified tools and programs such as Cami that we've already brought back that'll help, especially in the secondary level. We make new professional contacts that can be valuable resources, not for us, but for the district and for our goals. And so also we come back with ideas to help support teachers in their professional development and also help support the students. I just wanted to leave you with an idea. When I say positive feedback, people were openly tweeting about what they learned and how they were excited to go back and do these things. And this was just a sampling. So when we say thank you, we really do mean that. This opportunity was amazing. Not only do we get to go and teach, but we got to learn, and the district benefits from that.
Thank you, and thank you for presenting and going and presenting at the conference. That's really big. That's participating. That's not just taking, but giving. So we're very proud. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Thank you so much. Mr. Andrews has the 2018-19 STAR data to share with the board.
All right, I'll try to be as exciting when we data crunch as later, so bear with me here. Okay, so as we did last year at this time, I'm just here to update on our STAR Renaissance growth data throughout the district. And as Heather and I had given last summer, this first slide for STAR Math, and then the similar one for reading, is reporting performance percentiles for students who have met our proficiency, those average scores of those students. So you have the spring of 2018 paired with fall 2018 and spring 2019 that just occurred at the end of April and beginning of May of this school year. And as you can see across the grade levels, again here for your top, for our top students who had, not top, but for our students who had otherwise passed proficiency on the exam, they all had seen growth to varying levels. That starts to get much more narrow as you go down the line, and the upgrade, which is something we'll talk about and revisit at the end of my presentation here. But again, growth across the district there. What I didn't present last year, and kind of wish I would have, is the mean SGPs for each grade level. So SGP stands for Student Growth Percentile, which is very much so present and at the forefront in education. Of course, it's taking a look at where a student currently is and then measuring how well they've grown based on where they started. So if you see for like for fifth grade, the average SGP of 61.6% means that they performed better than 61.6% on average of their academic peers. And an academic peer is just defined as an individual who had performed similarly with the first benchmark assessment. So for the most part, it's their fall assessments where they took right away at the beginning of the school year.
So it's not a growth measure, it's just an actual, right, where they are at that time?
So whereas this one was a performance, like how they're doing in terms of proficiency, this is growth compared to those who had scored similar to them in the fall. So, and it's just an academic peer. It's based on performance alone. No demographic or anything like that is taken into consideration when making those academic peer groups.
Okay, they just make them based on what again?
How they performed.
How they perform. So if they were in the top group, how they performed with other people in the top group?
How much they grew in relation. So
how much they grew in relation?
On average, fifth graders grew 61.6% more than their academic peers. So again, it's celebrating where a student is and how much growth they've had. And this is something that, again, is it's a big focus in our district as well. It's part of certified staff evaluation. It's 30% of certified staff some of the score, and it's part of administrative evaluation as well.
And how do these compare with the numbers from last year? I know you didn't present them, but how were they?
I didn't do. We don't in the past for para. It's broken down by building.
Okay.
So all grades and the average. That way you can compare that data. Since again, it's how well they grew in relation to their own academic peers. So you can make that average 8.5 or 6.8 or 9.12 or 9.11. So we just don't have that breakdown. But moving forward, hopefully we will.
Okay.
So we can give some comparative data there. So I apologize for that. And then again, same thing here with the reading data, and you can definitely see that as we talked about last year, when you get to the latter portion and get into the secondary, we start to see some scores go down in terms of, again, this is your average students who otherwise have met our proficiency level, their average percentile scores. So scoring better than in the fall for 10th graders, 54% is the average percentile ranking in terms of performance on that assessment. Again, something we'll address when we have some takeaways at the end. Still though, you do see that they have grown by the time you go from fall to spring.
So in some of the cases, from spring 2018 to spring 2019, the numbers actually go down?
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, actually, so in first grade, the grade, technically then they're in second grade in the next year. So you're looking at completely different cohorts of students, which teachers absolutely make sure and plan for based on the needs of their students. So they differentiate their needs based on each different cohort of kids. So it just shows how dynamic our teachers are, that they're able to respond to their needs. And then, so even though like in the grade they had started, they were at 86% in first grade in the spring, but then the fall are at 60, the average is at the 65th percentile. That's also being measured against a completely different level of standards. So kindergarten versus, or I'm sorry, first grade versus second grade.
But basically being compared against the same group, right?
Correct.
So why are these going down?
Every year.
Every year.
Well, it's the same cohort of kids, but it's a new set of standards that are more difficult. So they're otherwise showing their proficiency level in relation to things they have yet to actually have the opportunity to master. So that's what the whole school year is.
May I interject? I think sometimes there's confusion between a percentile and a percentage. And so when your child scores at the 88th percentile, it doesn't mean that they got an 88%. It means they
Right, right.
scored better than 88% of all the other students at that particular age. So when they move into a new class, the standards go up. So in second grade, the material is more difficult than what they had at first.
But isn't it the same group of kids that you're being compared against? The same group, roughly, of students?
Well, it's the
That's what
same, so the norms that are used to then,
National
are otherwise, those are norms that are national norms, so it's not necessarily their performance with just the kids in Dunlap, it's against the national.
Right, so these are their
established.
percentiles compared with other children across the country, not based on the norms. It's just based on who it's compared against, right?
Say
You know
that
what I'm
again,
saying? So these percentiles are showing how they perform with other students across the country.
Correct.
And so I'm just saying, they're still going down in some instances, and I'm just wondering if we're looking into that.
No, absolutely.
Okay.
So yes, absolutely. This is part of, so you're seeing this at a very high district level reporting out. Individual buildings have various ways that they warehouse their data and have data walls where STAR data is just one piece of data that they look at. Formative assessments that are aligned to specific standards, those are that's where the rubber is going to meet the road. So they're taking a look at that because increased performance on those things will ultimately help on this. So absolutely, this is very much so taking a look at.
I had asked a few days ago about whether we could have like a trend to show like the last 3 to 5 years. Would you be able to do that for the next meeting?
If that's
That's something we can work on, but we have that form that we would like to fill out, like we
Okay.
talked about at our board retreat. And if the board feels that's something that they would like to see, then we can surely do that. But that'll take a little bit of time. It's not something Matt can create overnight. There's going to need to be some work done with it.
just a bit,
But we can do that.
absolutely.
That would be great.
Matt, I think the concern that you're hearing is when you look at these scores, for the high school, they're going up. For the middle school, they're kind of flat, which is fine. But it's the elementary school where they're trending down. Not a lot, but they're still really good.
Right.
But I think that's what you're hearing. Are you concerned about that?
We are, and so that's one of the takeaways we'll discuss here.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then these are just the SGPs for the STAR reading assessment, again broken down by grade level there. So again, in terms of what STAR Renaissance considers to be proficient SGP, anything between a 45 and a 65 is considered proficient. That's the range they want you in. Anything that's in the 66 to the 99th percentile is considered excellent. So taking a look at this, okay, so some growth implications, some strengths. Our math scores continue to perform above the 70th percentile as they had in the previous year for those students. In reading, all at one grade level, again, so the average in that 60th percentile. And then in terms of SGPs, reading and math was somewhat similar. So again, we're definitely well within that proficiency range. And grade levels where, obviously start to see the disparity. Individual building levels do notice that, and that's something that they respond to very quickly. By differentiation within the classroom, our RTI program, all of those are different ways that they can add that. And SGPs, again, just indicate on average students performing at a rate better than more than half of their academic peers. And so that's all students, as opposed to the first data, which was just those who had scored it within our proficiency range. So one thing we did talk about last July was taking a look at other benchmarking assessments, and we wanted to really get some feedback. That was something that was discussed at DLT, and so that is something that both our para committee will be taking a look at this year. It's on the docket of things to examine and to look into, as well as our curriculum council, because they need to have some skin in that decision-making process as well. Because again, especially when we get to the secondary level, we look at apathy. When I was in the classroom, there would be a good number of times where I would have students who would click a click and they were done in 2 minutes. Well, the average test should take anywhere from 18 to 22 minutes, not 2. So that's obviously going to skew your data. Your percentiles are going to look poor. So that's why you see that trending down, and it's being seen at the elementary level as well. So teachers, when they can, they catch that and have students retake the test and explain why it's important to represent themselves appropriately and get a good snapshot of where they are. But again, let's ultimately ask. Any questions?
Okay.
I guess in terms of changing our assessments, the only, I guess the downside is that then we can't look at the trends
Correct.
if we change them. So will the committee be looking at that? And
Absolutely. At the teacher level, wanting to make sure that the assessment that we're using is going to give us data that's going to be useful for students' next steps. We have, for many years, had some concerns shared at the high school math level in particular because the skills don't quite equate to what they're actually learning within the classroom. It doesn't go with the natural progression of how a high school student makes his or her way through math from freshman year to senior year. So again, your data is not going to be a true representation of where they are because they might be assessed on something that they've learned 2 years ago and isn't necessarily relative to learning what's going on in the classroom. So it's not measuring what's going on within the classroom. So looking at an assessment that's going to be aligned appropriately.
So for the locally created assessments, that we wouldn't be able to compare that to any other standardized assessment.
So as the STAR does otherwise have many different types of reports that are available for educators. One of them is a standards report where different types of questions are absolutely aligned to standards because that's why it's on there. It's just not necessarily in the progression at the secondary level with how a student goes through those. So.
I think you were asking about comparing it to other schools or other students across the country.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No. Locally, again, that's something that we use here to respond to the students' needs. So. A locally created assessment that's targeting just a few set of standards, that's going to give the teacher what they need in order to prepare for the next day of instruction and get that student what he or she needs to improve.
But we do both, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So are you going to continue with STAR for high school?
So for the next year, we are, and that's part of our two of our committee's works is taking a look at what assessments might be better suited and would give us what we need in order to make sure that we have the best data to give us the best picture of the student overall.
Are there any other questions? Well, thank you very much for your presentation. Next, Mr. Andrews has a presentation on middle school enrichment.
All right. Again, this is an update to our February board approval of the process for enrichment qualification for the upcoming school year, the 2019-20 school year. We had piloted in the spring, and we needed to make 2 changes due to low qualification numbers in the pilot score. So after grading the ELA assessment and the math assessment, in terms of students who had passed both steps and actually qualified at some grade levels out of building was in the single digits. So it was a very stringent process, and we needed to make sure that we went back and took a look at why it was such bleak numbers. And really what it was, what it came down to was what we had said is our proficiency percentage, and so I'll get there. This first slide hasn't changed. It's still the same for that first step. To pass the first step, they have to have a 90% average in ELA or math for the first 3 quarters of the school year. Their STAR reading or winter benchmark must be in the 75th percentile. Or higher.
Sorry.
It's all good. And a score of 4 or 5 on the IAR, the Illinois Assessment of Readiness, formerly PARC. So again, they have to have 2 of the 3 of those. For the second step, we used to have the first set of criteria that we had was that they had to have all 3 of these criteria met. But recognizing again, everyone has a bad day. So when they took that local assessment and they didn't perform poorly, but yet they have the ability, we want to make sure that we are otherwise giving the students what they need and enriching their aptitudes, right? So we made that change as a committee. Everyone was in agreement that still the COGAT score, because it's still 2 out of the 3, one needs to be set at 120. Those standards are pretty straightforward in terms of the assessment system that puts that out. And then the only other change we made was to the local assessment. Instead of it being at either the 85th or 90th percentile, that it needs to be at the 70th. Because when it was being graded, it was being graded really with the lens of this is where they should be almost at the end of the year that they were trying to get into enriched math or ELA. So making sure that we're identifying those kids who show, again, the potential and need that enrichment to, again, improve. So
for the COGAT, when is that given?
the COGAT is given, in the past was given in February. Now, that is a date that I'll be speaking with the middle school principals about because they have to pass this first, they would pass this first step to then go ahead and then take the COGAT during this second step.
But for 6th grade, is it just the COGAT? So aren't they doing it, is this just 7th and 8th grade?
So this would be 6th, 7th, or 8th. So they're not using the 5th grade score, but they're able to then take it, and again, as a 6th grader. Going to 7th, or as 5th grade, yes, they would still be taking that window in February.
And so with this guidelines, did you get more students, the same students, fewer students?
The number was more what we're looking for. Again, the point of the process was never to keep students out or to decrease section numbers. Mm-hmm. It was to make sure that students were being placed appropriately because there were a number of students that the teachers had noticed over the years that weren't being placed appropriately. And so giving both the students and their families as well as the teachers the information they need to make sure that, again, they're being placed where they need to be.
So I guess my question is, based on last year, does this provide the same number of students, like number, or are we going to have fewer students in honors math and power lit?
Because of the change from the 2 to 3, it would be about the same or more.
Or more, okay.
So again, wanting to create that opportunity.
Because didn't we have a pretty high percentage that got, I mean, the grades for those classes came out pretty well, if I recall. Mm-hmm. So
yep.
It would seem that we wouldn't want fewer, I mean, I guess, based on what we've done.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the questions I have is, in high school, you can pretty much decide if you want to do honors or a regular class. I think if you have an A or a B for the most part. One of the concerns I heard when knocking door to door was that a lot more people want in, and we're wanting to raise, how we perform. Why don't we let more in?
So at the middle school level, it's we're wanting to make sure that, again, we're placing them appropriately so they're going to perform and be successful within that environment. So this process has been in place, and it was revised to make sure, again, that it was being done to identify students and putting them where they need to be. Again, it's just been our historical trend to make sure that those students who are ready for that challenge are being placed appropriately.
I guess following up on that, given that anybody can take an honors class in high school, it seems that some of the students who didn't take honors in middle school will now be taking honors in high school, mm-hmm. Yet they may not have had the advantage of having honors in middle school. So while it may ensure that the kids in middle school are all going to be successful in those classes, it actually puts the kids who are going to take honors in high school at a disadvantage because they haven't had those classes. So I share Anne's concern. I wonder why we don't let the kids who are going to choose to do honors in high school, why can't they choose to do it in middle school?
Again, historically, this has been our appropriate past practice to make sure we're identifying the kids that need to be there.
But what do you think of that? Is that a concern? I mean,
it would be a concern from in stating a class is enriched that potentially has students that aren't necessarily going to be ready for that challenge and cause frustration and then apathy within them. Just because developmentally it's already a very trying time for the young adolescents. So again, wanting to set them up for academic success because again, if they're not doing so well there, that can spill into so many other things. Mm-hmm. So wanting to make sure that they can just place appropriately.
I guess to summarize what he's saying is in the junior high, if they choose, or middle school, they choose not to do the honors class because developmentally they're not ready, or they haven't had the background, or they don't test well enough. When they get to high school, they may be ready, but that's because we've prepared them for success at that level by enhancing those skills, maybe not at the enriched level, but then they can be successful at the high school level. The concern is if we put them in too early, are we setting them up for failure, and are we going to sour them to that level of class moving forward? If you're immediately unsuccessful out of the gate, do you have a defeatist attitude? Well, I don't even want to try it because I tried it once and it didn't go well.
Very well said.
I just worry about them not having the material that the other kids had.
Well, even our regular division, it's very challenging. And it's not a watered down curriculum. It's just not enriched, but it's a very solid curriculum as evidenced by how well our students do across the board.
Aren't their scores dropping? So why wouldn't we give more people the opportunity to do it?
Say that again.
The performance of students in enriched classes, that hasn't gone down. The STAR data, which is
The STAR data.
is, again, just one data piece. But on the balanced scorecard where it talks, I forget which component it is, but that does show that, again, students who are placed there are being placed appropriately because the overall average performance shows that they
If I might, at the high school level, I would be really hesitant to put a whole lot of stock in the STAR data. Because our students, there's a high level of apathy towards STAR testing. They're focused on the SAT and the ACT and their AP exam and the regular exam. They really aren't too concerned if we get real quality data from the STAR test.
Why we spend money?
So you'll see that's why the kind of plateaus out.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I think that the quantitative assessments that you have in place indicate whether a student is prepared to take on the challenge, because it's a big jump. I recall that in math, skipping basically a whole grade, it was pretty scary for me as a parent. But the numbers showed that, they were ready to do that, they were prepared to do that. So, they're not being set up for failure, and hopefully they're being set up for success. The only downside, and I understand, the idea of, if they do enrichment at the middle school, then maybe they'll be more inclined to do it at the high school level. But I think the opposite is true. If they stumble, then especially as they're at that age and that time in their life, then you may not get them back up on the horse again. The only downside is when a student determines that they really want to do like a STEM college career type thing, so that if they can take enriched math, they're basically taking honors algebra, right? And so then they can get through more math classes, right, or English. But I think the math piece is maybe just the one thing where if they didn't get started, then maybe they can't do the whole thing.
They can't take calculus, right?
Well, but they can, and students sometimes take they'll double up. Mm-hmm. So I mean, if they have determined at that later part of their high school careers that that's something they're going to pursue, they're going to make it happen. And they could take dual credit classes.
And they do have to double up is kind of the downside,
So a couple data points that you need to be aware of, and they're not going to connect anything tonight, but we have a lot of kids who don't do the honors track in middle school, and they come into high school and they try to do it. Not saying they can't, some kids are successful, but we have a lot of drop classes and level changes after those first couple weeks. They get in there, they realize, so to Ann's point, they weren't prepared for that. So there is some of that. But what Heather and I have been working on prior to her leaving was a firm called Equal Opportunity Schools. And what they do, they specialize in giving access to AP courses for students who are traditionally not be labeled as AP students. They do a student profile that is like the gold standard in aptitude test for academics for students. And they identify students with characteristics other than prerequisites they've taken to determine whether or not they'd be a good fit or be successful in AP classes. And what they do is they get these students of different backgrounds into AP courses, so they increase their number of students in AP courses, and their AP score stays the same. Not only do they identify and replace them, but they also work with the AP teachers for strategy to help them succeed in that AP class. Now, for instance, human geography would be a basic level AP, entry level AP course. They would work with the teachers, say, hey, the first AP test we give them, we're not going to count for a grade. We're going to get them acclimated to the rigor of an AP exam. The second AP test we give them, it may come in and count at 50%. By then, we've got the tools and they understand where it's at, what their goals are, what their levels are, and they're able to succeed. So it's a really fascinating company. that we'll bring to you later on this year, what they're able to do. But again, to Ann's point, it's increasing access to these upper level classes, the more rigorous classes for more students, and students of diverse backgrounds.
And is that at just the high school level, or can you start that at the middle school level?
That's just at the high school.
Okay.
But I mean, it addresses that gap when we talk about not having those students prepared for the honor stuff.
Well, and for 8th grade algebra, it used to be that you gave a local test, but the parents could make a decision whether they want that student in that algebra enriched. Is that going to continue?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of the handbook.
Yeah, because it's like a high school class.
Yep.
Well, I think that's great, that idea that you have and that company you're talking to, because I think that we're missing some kids who could do that.
Yeah.
And I just wish we could get them a little earlier.
Yeah, because a lot of parents, I mean, I just hear that over and over, they're very frustrated. The student wants to do the middle school honors track, the kid wants to do it, and they're being told, no, you can't do it. And I think you should let kids personally decide. You know, so if they don't do well, that was their decision. I don't know, it seems like to me you're holding back a bit.
I see both sides. I also see where, just like, well, you went to Vanderbilt, right?
Yeah.
They didn't let everybody into Vanderbilt because they had prerequisites that they wanted to ensure that those students could succeed. You know, it's the same thing in some of our upper level classes. They have to have some basic content knowledge and skill set to be able to succeed in that upper level class. So it is a delicate balance between opening up access and then giving them full access to it.
And the other
Because
thing-
the last thing we want in our AP classes is for our teachers to slow down and not cover all the content.
Right.
So our kids now aren't ready for the AP exam.
That's true, and I understand
So-
that challenge too. You know, another thing that Heather talked about one time was, I talked about with her, is having something kind of like in between. Like an algebra, 8th grade algebra class for the kids who aren't honors, but they still get the 8th grade algebra. You know, still on a report card, our percentage of 8th graders taking algebra is lower than the state average, whereas, you know, our numbers are high on everything else. And so a way maybe to get that is to allow kids to take algebra, maybe not at the honors pace, but at least so then if they decide they want to take calculus as a senior, they have that opportunity, whereas now the only way to do it is double up.
Yeah.
Or take summer.
And I wouldn't go forward with anything like that in high school without our leadership team, the teachers who teach the AP courses, because there is a delicate balance between those students that, I mean, a student that comes in with a trigonometry background and goes into our AP calculus, AB, is going to struggle because we offer honors trade, which is entirely different and more in depth. And then those students go into our AP calculus, AB, and they do really well.
Right.
So it's a balance between we want to keep our scores high, but open up access, and that's when I proposed that, or mentioned that EOS, Equal Opportunity Schools, they have that format and structure in place to support those kids and give them that. So that's
okay.
That's all part of the conversation that we had as far as DLT that Matt mentioned as part of this process with Curriculum Council. All this is in discussion.
Great.
And whereas before, again, it was that cut score, which was otherwise a confusing thing to explain. Again, now there are multiple different measures, and it's not necessarily all of them.
So this is going to make it a little bit more
Equitable,
accessible.
absolutely. Realizing
What you're
that-
proposing now.
Right.
Is there more to the presentation? We're on step 2.
So this is just recapping the move-in student process. Nothing has changed there, just with the exception of the 70% and the local assessment score to be similar to those for students in district. And then this was just a reminder for, a reminder and then just for information for review board members for the re-qualification requirements.
Very good information and a lot of very good discussion. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Dillman will now share information regarding middle school athletics.
Katie and I met, talked about this. I've talked with a couple different board members. I think I got a pretty good handle. It's not really board policy, it's handbook language. This basically states kids playing up is in emergency situations, basically for numbers. And having spoken with Katie, we're going to look at that language and make a change to allow those in special circumstances to have the ability to play up, so to speak, as the handbook language states. So we'll get that cleaned up. Katie, anything else you want to add to that or pretty much summarized it
We
pretty
had
well.
talked about it earlier in the spring, and I had taken it to the high school coaches and the ALT. Just one thing that was kind of discussed was special circumstances with permission by the junior high AD, and then the head coach of the program would be the head varsity coach, that they would be involved in that decision as well, so it's not just one person making that decision, so that it's not happening.
So this language that's in here is not proposed language?
No,
Okay,
no, that's the current language.
I gotcha, okay.
That's what
And
is
so-
going to be changed for action next month.
I see, okay, that's how it was confusing. And so, go ahead. So it'll be the assistant principal then at the middle schools will make a decision, not the athletic director?
So, assistant principal / athletic director, but what we had put was that players only move up for special circumstances, and that would be discussed with the assistant principal / athletic director, and then the head coach of the program as well, the high school coach. So I guess the AD at the junior high.
At the junior high, okay. And so special circumstances could include ability?
Yeah.
Okay.
So for track, because I had sent you an email on that, for track, for the last 3 years, they have run kids up. So is that going to still be allowed? And it didn't go to an AD person, it was just whoever ran the fastest got to run. So is that going to continue?
That changed about probably 3 years ago, I would say, when this discussion was originally had, and that was actually one of the things that started the discussion was track and cross country, and those where, yeah, you have the times and the faster the kids ran, and so that changed at that point. That's when the discussion about sports started, and then we had the change in policy, I guess, this spring. But we have since talked about that. Like I said, I talked about high school coaches and the ALT, and then also with the middle school APs. With Antonio at the time, and to have them reach out to the middle school coaches as well. So the track has been doing that for the past 3 years.
I just, when you look at the language, it's not clear.
So I guess this is the old language.
That language
that's
is
the language
output in
that's
this
in
year.
I mean, current.
To clarify that, the current language, when the board approved the handbooks a few months ago, that set into motion a process. For instance, we already have our physical handbooks at the middle school for the 1920 school year. The language that was added for this school year has been our practice for the past few years. With that being said, we added that language to make sure it was in the handbook, but that was also part of the conversation. Hey, let's get together, let's get a leadership team of middle school people, high school people, let's get together and let's talk about what our philosophy is as a district when it comes to middle school athletics. And then from there, if we need to change the handbook for the 2020-2021 school year, then we would do that. What we didn't want to do is rush into a decision, change the handbook language, and then all of a sudden say, oh, we didn't think this through, we didn't think this through. So the language that was added for this school year, the 1920 school year, that's currently in our handbooks, that has been our past practice. We just added the language to the handbook to make that a little bit more clear.
And if when we present the action item next month and the board approves it, we can amend the current language to have it effective immediately, if the board so chooses at that time.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Disposal of the district bus. Information regarding the request to dispose of the district bus is in the board packet. Are there any questions regarding that issue? All right. Information regarding replacement of the bleachers at the Dunlap High School gym is included in the packet. Are there any questions on that issue? The updated district balance scorecard is included in the board packet. Are there any questions on that issue?
I think I had some questions. The SAT scores down a little bit.
Correct, we just got that right before this was published, so absolutely. That will be something that we have conversations with regional council, the high school.
Okay.
Okay, and then what will be the process, Dr. Dearman, for, just kind of monitoring some of these? Will you prepare a report on these different issues where if there's a not meeting the goal, or what's the process for that?
Well, we have to get the data first, which we don't get until later in the fall, if I remember from last year.
Aggregated data so that we can look at it. So right now we have our average positive, while we can obviously see, yes, that's not, where we want it to be compared to last year, but we also want to see going up. The disaggregated data we're not going to get until later.
Oh, okay.
So then we can dive into that information in more detail once we have the full information packet, and then look at potential changes if they're needed, or adaptations, modifications, so on and so forth. But we can't really do much when we have such a broad view right now. We need to narrow it down. But we'll be able to do that once we get the data in the fall.
So, and I think I'd asked a question, so the goal setting by department, is that usually something that's done in August that's reported out, or later? I can't remember who.
The goals for the future targets?
Yeah, and goals by department.
Those were actually set out and forecasted when, after the creation of the new strategic plan.
A couple years ago.
And so it's just, those we haven't had the opportunity to sit down to audit these indicators, to make sure that these align with what has come up through our TLT discussions, to make sure again that this is appropriate with what we're wanting to do. So that is something that we've been talking about, we'll be doing once we bring the final version of the balanced scorecard in November. For the indicators that are still missing.
It needs some attention.
Okay.
One of the balanced scorecards is to increase the number of students participating in Power Lit. So with this new, this is on page, it's under provide a challenging and positive learning environment and the pursuit of excellence. So with this new way that you're going to be looking at students and evaluating, are you believing you're going to get more students into Power Lit?
Absolutely. The intent of it was, again, to make sure that we're appropriately identifying these kids who are ready for that challenging environment is set up by that curriculum.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Wage guidelines for occupational therapists and physical therapists are included in the packet. Are there any questions? All right, this concludes the information discussion items. The board will now move on to the consent agenda.